another Creative University session. Welcome. We have another really good one today where we will be featuring Ann Lee, who's co-founder and CEO of Community Organized Relief Effort, which is the relief effort organization, humanitarian organization that Ann co-founded with actor Sean Penn. Ann, why don't you join me now?
Hi there.
Hey, great to see you.
Thank you so much for having me, Peter.
No, it's great to have you, Ann. And I want to make sure, I don't think that I'm sharing any screens right now, so it's just you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So everybody, it's really a true pleasure to have Ann with us. And we're going to talk about her journey, her advice to all of you, what this great organization does. I'm wearing the CORE hat.
I love it.
Why we were playing, or I was playing the song Woman by Karen O. I'll ask Ann about that because that was her song selection. I always ask my guests to pick a song, any kind of song that they want. And before that, Ann, I don't know if you heard, I played R.L. Grimes' song CORE.
I love it. I heard it.
That was my little nod. So with that, let me just read a little bit of the bio, but then we'll get to you about your journey. So Ann has 20 years of experience in managing large-scale humanitarian response and sustainable development programming across a variety of sectors, including emergency relief, community upgrading and infrastructure, livelihoods and economic growth, and local governance. She co-founded CORE, Community Organized Relief Effort, with actor Sean Penn, as I said. And CORE is an evolution of Penn's earlier humanitarian organization that focused on reconstruction efforts in Haiti after the devastating earthquakes were there. And Ann was already on the ground before the earthquakes, and we'll talk about how that all came to be. During her time with CORE, she has overseen CORE's responses to crises in Puerto Rico, across the Caribbean, in Latin America, and also, importantly, here in the United States, and very significantly with COVID and what's going on there. So we'll talk about all that. So I met Ann when I was writing a Forbes article about what I call disruptors and people who are change makers, who are taking action, doing new things, impactful things that are really interesting to me. And I think that the world should know about them. And you know, when I met you at that CORE event, it was a major event. It was a major Hollywood media entertainment event. And Ann was just great. Her energy is great, and I wanted to feature her story. So Ann, with that, I'm going to kick it off to you about, first of all, tell us a little bit more about CORE, and then we'll get into your journey about how you got from here to there, and then your thoughts about leadership and how young people, like the people watching in now, should think about that.
So just wanted to say thank you. I'm in incredible company just looking at the lineup before and after. So thank you so much, Peter, and it's awesome to be here. Essentially, our organization was really built out of, I have to say, a drive between Sean and I being kind of frustrated with how our sector was running. It's a really outdated sector. You know, humanitarian assistance was kind of born out of, you know, traditional sort of, you know, disasters that happened 40 years ago. And the whole system was sort of set up around like famines and so on and so forth. The nature of our crises now have shifted so much, but these systems with the UN and how we respond are still so old and stuck. So, you know, the mission around CORE is having a much more sort of person-centric approach, where rather than looking at the things that we're providing and dumping things into a place that needs support, and more of, you know, how do you improve the quality of life of an individual, which often requires a much more nuanced, integrated, long-term but immediate response to these disasters, which seems so logical sometimes when you say it out loud, but in our sector, it's still not discussed in that way. And meeting somebody like Sean was just a huge eye-opener, because Sean, again, is this, you know, iconoclast that kind of works against sort of, you know, traditional ways of how things work, and will bust through challenges and old ways of thinking. And we really connected around that, especially in Haiti, when it was such a massive response in a very, very complex space.
And one of the things that really struck me when I met you first and you were talking about CORE is that Whereas a lot of organizations, relief organizations and the government take time, significant time to even get feet on the ground. C.O.R.E is in there immediately. You mentioned immediacy, and that's a big part of what I had understood about the mission.
And I think a lot of that is, again, like knowing that, you know, the contexts are very different in every disaster, but it's also not difficult to expect the unexpected, right? Disasters often just kind of uncover larger issues that are happening. When you respond to disasters, the places that get hit the hardest are always the ones that are the poorest, have been socially excluded, economically excluded, where there's, you know, sometimes racism. So it's not hard to pinpoint the areas that are going to need the most support.
Yeah.
So knowing that ahead of time, it's sort of like you can easily jump into those areas, and it's not rocket science in terms of, you know, what is needed to get provided. So, you know, just like how we've responded to this COVID space, we're not experts in COVID, nobody is, but just knew that we needed to jump in and we would figure it out, not by ourselves, but with partners, with the community, with local government, to find a solution. And really at the core of it is having that, I think, bravery to make mistakes, careful, calculated risks,
Yeah.
and being acceptant of those risks to kind of, you know, do it and not sort of be in this paralysis of analysis that we often find sometimes in this sector.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, Anne, where are you calling in from? And what are you doing right now?
I'm actually calling in from one of our COVID testing sites at Dodger Stadium. It's one of our biggest ones that we have across the US. We are in about 10 cities right now, 44 locations, and it's a mixture between mobile units that go into targeted underserved neighborhoods to provide testing, and also static drive-through testing sites. So in Los Angeles, we have about capacity to test 15,000 people per day. And we're at, since we started at the end of March, we've tested over 1.3 million people.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's remarkable. Good for you. And for the students out there and young people out there, what kind of opportunities can they have? We'll get into your journey, but what kind of opportunities can they have to get involved with what you're doing right now and to make a difference?
It is we have such a huge need. I mean, when we started this, we initially had one site serving, 250 tests per day, and we had volunteers. Soon after that, we were essentially hiring up a number of staff, and we went from, staff of 20 to about over 1,000 right now across the US. We find that the youth and the students that we have coming here to basically jump on into the front lines was just, it's inspiring. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're out here every single day. We throw things at them that aren't always easy, and they are not only rising to the occasion, but constantly are keeping us on our toes and keeping us accountable about, how we can improve the ways that we are doing things, and kind of thinking through, systems and, making sure that we have standard operating procedures. I mean, I know that this discussion is about sort of leadership and mentoring, but a lot of times I feel like it's the other way around. It's like I'm learning a whole lot from them.
Yeah, yeah, of course. And then you were telling me beforehand that there are opportunities actually to go beyond that, beyond volunteering, because there's a need as the organization grows for paid employees or paid leaders. Tell me a little bit about that for those who want to choose a different kind of path, especially during these crazy times where, this is a time, just one of the themes that we've heard from all the speakers is that this is a hall pass time. Like you have a hall pass to try different things. If you want to continue on the traditional path you were going on, like going to school, now that's great. That's understandable completely. School is very different, but that's definitely a path, and you're making that experience new and reinventing that. But it's also an opportunity for people for some who don't choose that path, to explore different aspects of life and maybe take a chance, and nobody's going to be judged on that. In fact, it may lead you a different direction. So tell us a little bit about some of the more non-volunteer opportunities.
So we have a lot of opportunities that we're constantly posting for safety, for, inventory, for everything under the sun, being on the line, managers, and we're constantly hiring because we are expanding, with our test sites. I think that, really the experience, and we get such a variety of folk that are coming here, and what I have to stress is like, it doesn't matter what your background has been, that you've been like a manager for 5 years here and done like this and that, like the humility and the pride in which they put their work forward in terms of being prideful of the work that they're doing to really impact the lives of people here in Los Angeles is, I can't tell you, like when I get depressed, I just talk to people here and it's like, it goes away. They're just all so inspiring. So there are opportunities here. And I think that, it's you learn so much, not just in terms of like, learning how to run a test site. It's so much more than that. It's about building community. It's about building leadership skills, social skills on how to interact. How do you communicate? And it's not always easy. I have to be very honest. Like a lot of times it's really difficult. When you have more than 5 people in a room, you're going to have politics, you're going to have, strife, you're going to have this and that. So, trying to balance that, human relationship part is not easy, but it's also a learning experience for us in leadership, but also I think for our staff. And so we try to do it with as much sort of consideration as possible, where people are coming from different places. For our site managers, for example, for the ones that are leading the different sites, we're putting them through a leadership training. We saw some gaps, and instead of, just reprimanding or saying like, it needs to be this way, like I feel so strongly that it's important to also sort of give them the tools, give them the experience, talk them through it, and give them the time to really rise to the occasion if there are gaps. We're very huge on sort of professional development and, being responsive as we can to the things that they're interested in learning, and constantly trying to keep it as a motivating environment, because the space is extremely difficult, high stress. Yeah. It's a lot of pressure, and we're in a very difficult period in time in our history.
Great time for leaders to emerge, right? Yeah. And develop that leadership, because leadership can be developed, and we'll talk about that a little bit too. But obviously there's the CORE's core mission, but all the aspects that come in with any organization about visibility, about engagement, about reaching out. So the social media strategies, all kinds of things that go on with it. But it's an amazing story. And so let's dig into your journey of how you got from there to here, because I know your bio. I know that, at least my recollection was that you were already on the ground in Haiti before the earthquake. Is that right? So tell us a little bit about, your, as a young person growing up, going to school, and then finding your way into humanitarian, a mission-driven life.
Right. I feel that it was something that was so instilled in me from a very young age through just my mother, who's been such a huge, support with other folk that come into the United States for the first time, and really supported we always had strangers kind of, coming through the house and living with us at any given moment, because of this, huge culture of sort of ethos of giving back and supporting other people. And she still continues to do that. And I was in New York after college, working for a law firm with this phenomenal woman who's still my mentor to this day. And that's when 9/11 hit. And we watched me and at the time, watch those towers fall down. And I was just kind of struck about like, what am I doing with my life? It was a huge inflection point for me about whether or not I was doing something that was making an impact in the world and in the way that I wanted to see it. It was after that I quit, and I ended up going to school for international development, and went abroad, lived in Kosovo, responding to minority refugee rights, and then just got hooked in this space. I mean,
did you just go, when you did that, when you went over to Kosovo, did you just go on your own, essentially? Take the chance?
No, I mean, and this is where I think, it's as you said, so much of it is around like connections and making like contacts, and in terms of what we discussed yesterday, it's so much of sort of making relationships that you would never expect would kind of lead to a specific direction.
Yeah.
While I was at school, kind of met through another friend, somebody was working in Kosovo, and I just cold called them, like no shame in that game, right? You just need to be persistent and kind of know what angle and use your contacts and whatever tools that you have at your disposal, and got myself over to the UN as a volunteer, a UN volunteer, for I think like about 4 months, and just was hooked at that point, and just knew that this was a calling that I needed to respond to. Soon after that, I ended up in Haiti in 2006 after completing my graduate studies, and was really passionate about sort of the work there, the long-term development work, focusing in on infrastructure, economic development, worked with women and increasing their access to jobs by training them in heavy equipment use. And when the earthquake hit, because a lot of heavy equipment operators at the time in Haiti were coming in from outside, so we wanted to train up women to take that role, which is not a traditional role in Haiti for women. The earthquake hit, and as you can imagine, there was a ton of rubble and a lot of things to be cleaned.
You were there at the time of that massive earthquake.
I was living there full time, but I was very lucky in that I was at home for the holidays. And I have to say, I was snowboarding on January 1st, 10 days before the earthquake, and broke my coccyx, which is the only reason why I was still in Los Angeles, which I was very, very fortunate about, because the earthquake did destroy my home, and lost a lot of friends and neighbors and coworkers. So I was very lucky in that I was not there, but was able to get back 2 days after the earthquake, because at the time I was running an office of about 30 and did not know whether they were okay, and had no contact with them. So got back to Haiti, and just the immensity of the destruction and sort of that crisis is a huge sort of turning point in my life as well. It really struck in terms of, again, the space that we're in the sector of how we respond to things. It's just disjointed. It just wasn't making sense.
Yeah.
And that's sort of when Sean kind of dropped in. And at the time, again, I just, by chance and by timing, had trained up these women, heavy equipment operators, and started cleaning the roads, started, tearing down the buildings, a lot of times
just doing it. Like, you had to just get in there, not necessarily a master plan, because somebody had to take action.
Right. And this is the thing, why I think it's, again, so important in terms of having a very iterative approach. It's like, people often get paralysis of analysis. Like, they need to see a full plan before they start taking that first step. You want to get as clear of a plan as possible, but know that you got to take a few steps forward, and then be able to quickly adapt and pivot as you're figuring out whether or not that continues to be the right way. So I think it's acting fast, being adaptive, and being able to pivot, I think, is super critical, not just in terms of the work that I do, but also the I guess, philosophy in life that I think has been very, very useful. When you have an idea that's stuck in your head of how it has to be or how it should be, it's like, we cannot let perfect be the enemy of good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I want to, before you get into the Sean story, because that's pretty funny, actually. Despite the, that sounds odd given the tragedy of it all, but the way your reaction, as I heard you tell it, it's pretty interesting. But some of the things that are recurring themes with all the speakers so far, and it's like literally 100% of them, what you mentioned. So taking action, not thinking that things, if this analysis paralysis, looking for the perfect, or believing there's a straight path to things. It's you did a cold call, which led you to your first opportunity in this world, really, in Kosovo, right? So, and that was based, and then you had relationships, which were part of that, your whole story. The pivoting that you mentioned, so that relates to flexibility. So having a, not being overly narrowly focused. So you have the ability to pivot in whatever it is, a life situation, a professional situation. That's a key thing. Certainly your life is part of it, showing that, again, that not the straight path necessarily. You didn't necessarily expect you'd find your way into Haiti, but as I heard a quote the other day that I thought was just so apt, because it's a theme for all of you students out there who feel like you need to have it figured out.
Yeah.
You don't. The quote was, "The linear life is dead. The linear life is dead," which I absolutely believe is the case. And having the flexibility to really understand that, internalize that, and be able to act upon that is a very important aspect of life. And especially as technology is transforming and globalism is transforming things so rapidly, that flexibility is increasingly important. But so anyhow, let's get back to, so Sean came in, and as do many celebrities frequently, which was part of your story. So continue on.
So Sean had come in and ended up at one of the largest displacement camps in Haiti. It held eventually it was about 60,000 people, which is kind of a small city. Mm-hmm. And when he landed and he was sort of, setting up shop there and supporting, the folk that were displaced, I was asked to come in and kind of talk with him and sort of give some support as an organization to his organization. And I was just avoiding it as much as possible. I mean, there had been a number of celebrities who had come through to kind of just go and take photos. And, it's something that, I feel strongly against in terms of, sort of the disaster tourism space. And so I was very skeptical. And when I sat down with them, he always makes this a point how the nickname he gave me was, I think, Ice Princess, and that's using let's say a nice word for Korean ice princess is I'll say it in nice ways, what he referred to me as, because I didn't, I don't have a poker face, and I can't hide my feelings very well. So, but, I was very skeptical, and I was asked to kind of bring on our team to help support with the heavy equipment and such. So it took me a while to warm up, but really, he was there for 8 months living in a tent on that displacement camp. And it was in, a few months in, and I was like, he's still here, and, what's going on? And, finally sat down and we kind of talked through some of his ideas around, why isn't it like this? And why are we responding like this? I have this idea of supporting the places, instead of just focusing on the camps, we should try to get people back into the neighborhoods, which again is not the traditional way that we do things in humanitarian assistance. The typical way is that we focus on camps, creating camps, a space, because it's so much easier to manage 60,000 people in one place.
Yeah.
You deliver food, you deliver water. It's one area, geographic area that logistically you can support. But in these modern times where you're having these disasters in urban areas, it doesn't function like that anymore. And so, again, him being sort of outside of the space as an outsider and kind of looking at it with fresh eyes was like, why don't we do it this way? And it was a light bulb that was like, holy shit. Yeah, let's do that. Let's totally do it. So and that's how the relationship sort of started. And I think it's been so much of what has made C.O.R.E what it is today, our, symbiotic relationship. He's always kind of constantly pushing us and constantly being like, why aren't we doing it like this? Bringing outsiders' perspective and really constantly looking at it from different angles. And then what I'm able to bring is sort of okay, how do we operationalize this? How do we make this real and on the ground? And so this, it's just been a phenomenal alchemy that I've been really lucky to have with him.
Yeah, and certainly the visibility that he brings is a powerful thing. And You know, so the evening that we met at this event, it was a massive event, and you raised, I don't even know how much, but it was a significant sum of money for it, and that enables you to have the kind of impact that you have. But students, again, there's an opportunity for all of you to get involved in it. One example, because before I forget to do this, and then I want to get into the leadership discussion, you have an amazing event that kind of talks about the reach that you all have through this combination with your network and his network, and the shared passion you have. So I'm going to put that up on the screen just really quickly. Okay, so tell people about this event, which is tomorrow evening, because when I saw this, it was fascinating.
I mean, it's so awesome. It's been such an incredible culmination of just people who love Sean and so believe in our organization and longtime supporters. It really started with, Dane Cook. He actually gave us our initial funding to kick off our COVID sites. So, that's how he just, kind of said, I believe in what you guys are doing. I believe in Sean. Like, how can I support? And he kicked off our initial sites. And from there, it was sort of this brainstorming and kind of bringing together all these incredible people that have been just supportive of our organization over the last few years. So we're so excited. It's so funny. And the team has just been working around the clock to make it happen.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. So everybody, a table read is, and this is going to be live streamed, and so it's not just audio only. It will be video too.
Mm-hmm. It's
Okay.
also on Facebook, on TikTok. Yeah.
Yeah. So a table read is as everybody sits around, and I assume that each has a specific part, and they read from the script. And
Yes.
so you will see Sean again being Spicoli, and so that will be pretty interesting.
Actually, we changed it up, and he's not Spicoli.
Okay.
It's an interesting modern take on it.
Okay. All right. That's good. And I'm not even going to ask you, because people should pop in to see who does what. Okay. I'm stopping sharing again. So throughout the course of all of this and just your journey yourself, from a leadership perspective, because we talked about this a little bit, your thoughts about leadership and how that how young people develop those skills, whether they're already inherent within them, can you develop them? If so, how do you develop them? All of that. If you could just kind of touch upon that a little bit.
I think that so much of it is experiential, and you learn so much by doing. I feel at least that's how I learn much better when I'm doing something, right? I think that's what I'm seeing, especially with all these young people that we have on site. It's not always easy. I think we need to kind of set an example first in terms of having a level of humility, right? Because it's not just a one-way directional thing where it's like, I'm going to give you all this knowledge and teach you all these things because I know so much more than you do. And it's not always easy. There's a huge amount of learning that I'm doing as well, especially here in the United States. I can't tell you how different it is to work here in the United States than, the places where I've worked in the past, whether it's in the Congo, whether it's in Haiti, or whether it's in the Bahamas. It's another learning curve. But I do think that, like, fundamentally,
And by the way, can I stop you for a second on that? Because when we talked about that yesterday, you were telling me that in some ways, working in the US was more challenging than working outside the US.
Yeah, it is. It is. I think here, especially with like this environment that we're in with COVID and a lot of, like, I feel like just generationally, I'm in my 40s, and there's so much change and so much incredible shifts in sort of how we address each other and sort of expectations that are very different from other countries. And so it's almost like reverse culture shock, where I've spent so much of my life outside of the United States. Coming back in here, it's like, oh, this is another culture that I also have to relearn, right? And being in this space as well. And then on top of that, it's a generational learning in terms of, like, how do people in this age group, what's the best way to communicate to them, where I can be heard, where they can be heard. Again, like, what I feel very strongly about is not to paint like a perfect rosy picture. I think we learn so much from our failures, right? And I think part of that taking risk part of it is not to be afraid of those failures. It's about what you can squeeze out of each of those failures to make yourself stronger, to make the organization stronger.
That's another theme that we've heard on time and time again from the people who have been featured in these sessions, where, and that really goes hand in hand with taking action too, and the analysis paralysis, because so many times, you know, many people who are watching this are very hard on themselves. You know, expectations are high. That's why you're going for it, which is an amazing thing. It's a wonderful thing that you have that kind of passion, but that it sounds easy to be not afraid to fail. It's hard to do. But I remember when I was speaking with Kevin Mayer in the first session, and he was talking about it. He was talking about first the nonlinear life, where he was a mechanical engineer. He had no idea he was going to get into the entertainment business, and that he had his failures, and that led to, you know, ultimately he is where he is. And so you don't have to have it figured out, people. You don't have to have it all figured out. But one thing is, but take action. Even when you have no idea what that action is, just try something. And by the way, I see Francesca and I see others have some questions. I will get to those, but I want to continue on. And I received some questions in advance, and feel free, people, to in the Q&A or in the chat to ask questions, and then we'll get to them with Ann. But Ann, talk a little bit more about that, about leadership and developing those skills. And you know, one of the things you mentioned were hard skills versus soft skills.
Yeah, so that is so critically important in terms of, you know, when I was in my mid-20s and I was leading an entire office with folk that were older than I was, that were also experts in their fields, whether they were engineers, whether they were experts in economic development. And, you know, there was so much sort of that imposter syndrome of like, what am I doing? Like, I'm faking it, and I haven't gotten caught yet. When are they going to catch me? You know, but I think the reality is that everyone's faking it. This is this is also something that one of Sean's biggest teaching moment to me, is that when I told him about sort of taking on this position with him, I think it was when we were doing something in Haiti, and it was a big project, and I was like, Sean, I think I'm really scared. I don't know if I can do this. And he's like, nobody knows what they're doing. Do you think I know what I'm doing? You just got to fake it until you make it. You know,
Yeah.
like, nobody knows what they're doing.
By the way, that's such a great line, and it's so true.
Yeah.
Everyone is faking it, and it doesn't mean that it's inauthentic fakery. It just is that nobody, you may think that Ann or anyone has it all figured out because they're so, you know, passionate, so good, you know, they have such a command, but it's a constant process. And it's not that you need to pretend like you do. In fact, a great part of leadership, I guess I'll chime in here for a second. One thing about leadership is that a true leader understands their strengths and weaknesses and is not afraid to bring people in to the team and let go and let those with different kinds of skill sets flesh out the team. That's what being a team is. You don't have to have it all figured out.
Exactly. And that's exactly the words that I used yesterday in talking to one of our managers, is that, you know, essentially my greatest strength is knowing what I'm not good at and knowing who can do those things that I'm not good at.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, you know, being able to be in a leadership position is basically that skill, and as well as having the soft skills, which is an art form. You can have the science down of being an engineer, knowing the technical aspects of something, but if you don't have this art form of knowing what motivates people, making sure that people feel good about what they're doing, getting the best out of people, which is so much of like a personable piece to this entire equation, then, you know, it's, you know, this was the reason why, as, you know, in my mid-20s, I was managing folk that were older, that were, you know, specialists in their fields, because the soft skills that I had is what's needed in that leadership position, not necessarily that specific, you know, hard skill to get, you know, build that bridge.
Yeah. And by the way, I do think, I'm curious to get your thoughts about this, that especially because of some of the themes we talked about, this, like just the way the world is moving forward so rapidly with technology and the globalism and all that. So this need for pivoting and flexibility, um, the, and education being transformed, all of that, I think that the kind of the road less traveled sometimes will actually, if we get down to kind of brass tacks about jobs and things like concrete jobs and things, a lot of employers will find benefit to doing a road less traveled, because of the learning that comes with it and the perspective that comes with it. And so, what do you think about that?
I
Yeah.
think that's right on. Like when we're looking at CVs and when we're looking at, folk that we feel are fitting within our ethos, at least for core,
Yeah.
we're looking at sort of that soft skill piece to it, not just like we have a lot of people who were servers and working at bakeries and stuff. And it's really sort of the interview process and kind of getting their, again, it's that alchemy of the personality and how they can really respond to stresses and things that are being thrown at them. We want somebody adaptive who's resilient and know how to communicate. And I think those are fundamentally issues that at the end of the day, like, will stick through any position and kind of, the best skills to hone over time.
And certainly give you perspective about life and what matters, what's important, and meaning, and a lot of the things that we're all struggling with, especially during these crazy times with COVID and the pandemic, and the forces that we all face. So your path is fascinating. I want to get into some questions because there are several. So Ella asks, and let me put my glasses on so I make sure I read it correctly. How do you prevent yourself, Anne, how do you prevent yourself from burning out when dealing with issues that are so emotionally and mentally taxing? And how do you find that balance in the work you do?
That is such a great question. And, I struggle with that a lot. I think, especially through these disasters where, you're basically functioning on adrenaline for a long period of time. And at a certain point, if you're not careful, you will burn out and make poor decisions, in which case could be, very, very life threatening in some cases. So, burnout is such a huge consideration. Like, we're very conscious about mental health with our organization. So for all of our staff here, for example, we keep mental health resources available to them because we want to make sure that our staff is also taken care of. For myself,
What does that look like, by the way? What kind of mental health resources?
so we have a roster and a network of therapists that they can reach out to and have, I think, 6 free sessions. We've been continuing that on over the last few months. We have a phenomenal woman, Nancy Sobel, who's been providing that service to us for free. So we've been very lucky to have that. For myself, it's always a difficult balance, but I rely on my network, my family, my friends, even my colleagues who call me out. I'm very, very thick-skinned, and I'm direct, and I expect the same from, my colleague to say, like, you need to go home and, take a nap or something like that, because sometimes we get so stuck in like sort of this grind that we don't think about ourselves enough. I know that that's a bit of a weakness on my end, but again, it's the network, it's the friends, and it's the colleagues that kind of keep me on my toes.
Well, certainly mental health is a topic that's been really raised to the fore with a number of the students over the course of the past several sessions. So we plan to, so for those of you who are watching both live and then who are gonna be watching this video, there will be sessions that are focused specifically on that and the issues that you face as students. And some of those sessions will be led by professionals. Some will be just student sessions so that you can open up to each other, whatever kind of conversations you want, but such a critical topic that is raised by everybody. So that too is wonderful that you're doing all of that and providing those resources. So I have a couple questions that were sent in earlier too. I have from Daniel. He asks, he's from San Francisco, and he asked, there are a few groups such as the Live for Life Coalition and Entertainment Industry Response in LA that are helping showbiz professionals pivot to help handle logistics and other needs for the COVID response. Does C.O.R.E have advice to offer those groups on how to be most helpful? And then he wants to know if there's any right person to follow up with, and we can do that afterwards and connect. But do you have any thoughts about that?
What I find so interesting is, so we work with, in preparation for our gala and a number of our events that we have every year.
Yeah.
I have one in mind, Joshua Productions in New York. They help us with our gala and our events. And so we're not having those anymore, right? So they've been able to pivot in such an interesting way. So when we opened up our mobile sites, testing sites in New York, I mean, a lot of this is logistics and, production, right? So actually a few of our best folk here are, because we're in Los Angeles and we're kind of in the space, are coming from the entertainment industry, from the production companies.
Yeah.
It's so logistic heavy. And so they've been providing all of our logistics and on our sites. They have actually jumped in and are actually running with our team these mobile sites. And so, again, it's like this incredible pivot that they've been able to do. So they're doing like the Fast Times live read with us, and then, helping us run some of the mobile sites in New York, because they're, essentially so amazing at logistics. So, I think that, being flexible in the space, again, is so critical. And a lot of those production companies have a ton of capacity that's underutilized. You could probably pop up better than we can some of these testing sites.
Yeah, absolutely now.
Yeah.
Absolutely right now, especially because there is no production, like you were saying. And for those of you who want to get involved in any kind of way to support the core cause, send a note to Luisa at Luisa at Creatv, which is spelled, as you can see, a little unusually, Creatv.media. So Luisa at creative.media. And then we'll take a look at those and I'll connect with Anne and her team on that. I have another question, and there's another one that popped up from Giuliano. The question is, thank you for doing this. How is the outreach being done to the underserved migrant population of Los Angeles County?
Oh, that's a good one. So we're working with the LA Mayor's office, and we're trying to break in with the county. So for right now, we're sort of within the LA City area, but we work very strongly with the Mayor's office, with local organizations to kind of do some of the outreach. The Mayor's been phenomenal in being one of the biggest voices to do, a lot of the PSA announcements. And we're doing the same with some of our celebrity supporters to have targeted PSAs on, specific segmented channels that can outreach to undocumented workers, as well as, for example, in Atlanta, we work very closely with a bunch of organizations that focus on refugee resettlement neighborhoods, the Latino Fund, and a lot of these incredible groups that kind of lend their credibility, as well as in churches in Oakland, to lend their credibility to open those doors and create that level of trust that people don't have in our healthcare system, especially in those neighborhoods. So we've been relying a lot on partners in areas that we're not familiar with. Here in Los Angeles in particular, with our mobile units, we're doing a lot of outreach with our mobile unit sort of community specialists. And essentially one of the things that we've been focused on is doing a lot of testing in the housing authorities. It's called HACLA. So it's Section 8 housing in Los Angeles, and doing that on a repeated basis so that, again, we breed the familiarity and the trust and sort of the regularity to make sure that people are getting tested.
Excellent. I have a question from Naomi. What are your thoughts on the idea of a natural born leader? How much is strong leadership based on intuition and natural talent, and how much is learned and developed over time?
That's such a good question. Wow, such smart people on this, this call. I would have to say, I don't think it's an either or. I think, you could have natural leadership qualities that basically might not serve anything if you don't hone those skills, right? And you can have sort of like, I actually probably don't think that there are like natural qualities that make you a leader. I think all of it can be learned. I have great faith in people that, with enough tools, development, time, and support, that you can take on these skills and sort of, rise up to the occasion. That's what I've seen. People that you would never think, could be such strong leaders are like coming out of nowhere. One of the person that comes to mind is this woman who leads one of our sites, and she's just like very small, delicate, very quiet woman, but she is a commanding force on our site, and she is so incredibly just inspiring, but not, I don't think that anyone would initially, when you talk to her, when you engage with her, get a sense of like, oh yeah, that's a natural leader. So I think that it's definitely something that you can just learn if you're given the right tools, time, and support.
How much do you think that just leadership by example is a real thing? In terms of when you think of leadership, to your point of a lot of people may not think of themselves as leaders because they don't get up to a podium and they're not, interested or nor are they comfortable doing that kind of what you would expect leadership to be, but they take action and they just do it. What do you think about that?
So when I started out, again, this is like, I always saw myself as the person behind the scenes. I never saw myself as somebody out in front, kind of taking the lead and being visible and vocal. I'm telling you, the first time I had like a speech when I was 29 years old in front of like 300 people, I tanked. I was in tears. It was embarrassing. There's even footage of it someplace, and it's just like, even thinking about it makes me sweat, and even, speaking in front of people is still really difficult. I still sometimes have to take like beta blockers to help with it, none of it is ever sort of like, oh yeah, I got this. For some people it is, but I had to work to do this, I had to figure out, with a lot of practice, with a lot of sort of watching people. I was very lucky to have incredible mentors who I could learn from. Sean is one of them. He's an incredible sort of off the hip speaker that's like passionate, and not just about the speaking piece, but sort of, having people that I can look up to and watch. And again, it's not necessarily somebody older and like wiser. And, again, I have a mentor, on site here that I look at. I'm just like incredible 27-year-old woman who has launched, these 6 sites on her own. I look at her and I'm just like, I want to be like you when I grow up. I don't know how you did this.
Yeah.
So, I do think it's a function of, again, like, it's something that you can learn and that we have to continue to learn how to do.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'll candidly, I was struck when I was at the event and Sean was speaking. First of all, you look very natural up there and seem very comfortable. But again, this is getting to your fake it sort of point. You just gotta do it, right? But Sean, who's this actor, you would expect, and I see it time and time again, we all have, where it's not necessarily that they feel the most comfortable speaking to a room either.
Yeah.
And, so it's the unexpected, because everybody's in the same boat, it's on all these things. Let's wrap up just because it's almost the hour. What is your advice to students out there who are sitting here and their minds are jumbled with everything that's going on and their worlds have been disrupted and upended in all kinds of ways? What do you say to them as they sometimes many times find it hard to get motivated and just find a way to take action, or a direction to take action?
I think the biggest lesson, is, especially in this time right now, embrace the uncomfortable, embrace the scary. Because if you're living a life that is very comfortable, that is very familiar, you're not growing, you're not changing, you're not evolving. And that's not good. I think that it is uncomfortable right now, but it's in these moments of chaos and craziness and uncomfortableness where you can have the most opportunity for fundamental change. When you look at the history of the world, the biggest shifts, positive shifts that have happened come after major times of strife and conflict and difficulty. So we need to look at the long game and know that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, right? We know this through history. There is a way out of this. And this is just a huge period where we need to take stock and take advantage of this uncomfortableness to push yourself in a space that might not feel good, that is a little scary, that could be right, you know, and could change your life. That's how I felt in Haiti. It was very uncomfortable to do something very different from what everyone else was doing, but it was the right thing to do, and it was the best thing I've ever done.
Well, and CORE is certainly a great, it could be a great answer for you, you know, for you students out there. It could be, because if there's, first of all, for those of you who just love the mission and want to get into the impact space, what a great organization that's growing significantly. Impact is growing significantly. The resources are flowing in, lots of opportunity, fascinating mission. But also for those of you who may not have a direction, which is okay, it's hall pass time. You know, the world is disrupted. CORE may be a good immediate response for you to take some action, to try it, to just try something new, and maybe you'll like it, maybe you don't like it, but that's okay. But if somebody wants to get involved, what should they do, Ann?
So they can go to coresponse.org/volunteer. I think that's the link. I can send you the link specifically, but they can definitely basically sign up immediately to be a volunteer, to look on our website for job postings, because we do put those out. And we're constantly looking for motivated, mission-driven staff. I have to say, our organization, comparatively to, you know, a lot of the sites that we see in other places, like we're getting calls from, you know, other states who want us to come in because our staff, the quality of like customer service, I guess you would call it, is different, because our teams here aren't here just to pick up a paycheck. They're here because they're mission driven. And that is, I think, the secret sauce to what we do.
Do the students need to live in the cities in which you are deployed right now? Or is there a way for somebody to get involved if they're not in Los Angeles or any one of the other cities that you're doing your great work?
Right now, we're looking for people who are in the cities.
Okay. Okay, great. So I think it is coreresponse.org. I believe that's what it is. Right. Yeah. But Ann, you're doing amazing work, inspiring, motivating. It was fascinating.
This is awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Peter, for what you're doing.
Well, thanks for being such a part of this. It's great. It's great. And I urge everybody to check it out, but we'll stay connected, share ideas, but thank you so much for doing this. And we'll make this available online to people, and probably turning it into a podcast too. So all the various series that we've had. So with that, everybody, thank you.
Bye. Thanks
again, everybody, for joining. Next week, next Thursday, and go to the Creative University website, check out all the different things, including immediate internships and mentorship opportunities for those of you who demonstrate that you really, really want it, because we want to see what you have, you know, what your passions are. And we want to see dedication to it, because that gets us excited and we'll go to bat for you. And if you have any questions about that too, feel free to reach out, and we can connect you with other students who have taken action and get their perspectives about Creative University, and can make the direct connection there. So with that, everybody, great to see you. Check out the Fast Times at Ridgemont High event. That's a live stream tomorrow night with Brad Pitt and Jennifer Aniston and a whole host of others. It should be fun. And it benefits a great cause. See ya.